What if I told you that one of the first things you ever learned about ice fishing is the very thing scaring away the biggest fish under your feet? It sounds crazy, I know. We've all been taught to drill a hole and immediately grab the skimmer to make it perfectly clean. But today, we're going to challenge that. We're talking about why scooping your ice hole until it's a pristine, black circle is a fatal mistake for spooky fish. By the end of this video, you'll understand the simple science behind this, and I promise it will change how you set up on the ice forever. This is the hidden reason that trophy walleye or monster crappie shows up on your sonar, gives your lure a curious look, and then vanishes into the deep. Think I'm nuts? Let me know in the comments right now if you're a clean hole or dirty hole angler. Let's see who's on which side before we even start. For decades, maybe even a century, the wisdom has been a clean hole is a happy hole. It makes it easier to land a fish, it keeps your line from freezing up as quickly, and frankly, it just looks right. We watched our dads do it, and their dads before them. You drill, you scoop. It's muscle memory. You scoop until you can see that perfect dark circle of water below. But this tradition was born in an era before we had things like underwater cameras and ultra-sensitive sonar that show us exactly how fish react to what we do up top. That old school thinking doesn't account for one crucial factor, a fish's perspective. We've been thinking like fishermen on top of the ice, not like the wary predators living underneath it. And that's where the big mistake lies. Let's start with the most obvious problem, the spotlight effect. Imagine you're in a dimly lit room. Now picture someone cutting a perfectly round, bright hole in the ceiling right above you. What's your first instinct? You'd either move away from that intense, unnatural light, or you'd stare right at it on high alert. This is exactly what a perfectly clean ice hole does. On a bright, sunny day, or even a cloudy one, that hole becomes a concentrated beam of light, punching through the dark ceiling of the fish's world. The snow and ice cover on a lake naturally diffuse and block sunlight, creating a muted, safe environment for fish. Your clean hole is a violent interruption of that natural state, screaming something is wrong here to any fish in the vicinity. It's an unnatural beacon of light. Now let's think about what we're breaking. The underside of the ice, especially with a layer of snow, is a fish's sky. It's their cover. For a fish like a walleye or a big crappie, this ceiling provides security from overhead predators like eagles and ospreys. It's a uniform, predictable environment. When you scoop that hole completely clean, you are not just letting in light, you are creating a perfect window for them to see you and for you to see them. You're breaking their camouflage. A spooky, educated fish that has survived for years knows that a sudden, sharp-edged hole in its ceiling is not a natural occurrence. It's a breach in its defenses. Think about it from a survival standpoint. Anything that suddenly changes their overhead cover is a potential threat, and their first instinct is to flee, not investigate the tasty-looking morsel dangling underneath it. This leads us to the shadow problem. When you stand or move near that clean, bright hole, you cast a shadow. From a fish's perspective, looking up from the depths, your silhouette moving across that bright circle is the equivalent of a hawk flying across the sun. It is the classic predator from above signal hardwired into their DNA for millions of years. Even the simple act of leaning over to check your sonar or jig your rod sends a massive, terrifying shadow monster across their ceiling. This is especially true in shallower water, say, under 15 feet. That sudden darkness flashing across the bright light is a universal danger sign in the animal kingdom. The fish doesn't know you're a harmless angler. It just knows a giant predator is blocking out the sky right above it, and it's time to disappear. And you probably never even realized you were doing it. Let's put this into a real-world scenario. Imagine you set up two holes side by side. One, you scoop out completely. It's a perfect black circle of water. The other you only partially clear, leaving a thin, translucent layer of slush. Now, if you could put an underwater camera under each, what you'd see is astounding. The view from under the clean hole is a harsh, defined circle of intense light. Any movement above is sharp and clear, but the view from under the slushy hole is completely different. The light is soft, diffused, and spread out. There are no hard edges. A shadow moving over the top is muted and indistinct. It looks far more natural, like a thicker patch of snow on the ice. Which environment do you think a wary 10-year-old walleye would feel more comfortable approaching? It's not the one that looks like a skylight to a predator's dining room. So let's really dive into a fish's point of view. A fish's eye is designed to look up. That's how they spot food and, more importantly, how they spot danger. Their world is defined by this overhead ceiling of ice. They are masters at detecting subtle changes in light and shadow against this backdrop. They know what a bubble trapped in the ice looks like. They know what a pressure crack looks like. They also know what a freshly drilled, perfectly round, unnaturally bright hole looks like. For us, it's a gateway to the fish. For them, it's a potential gateway for a predator. This is especially true for larger, older fish. They didn't get big by being careless. They got big by recognizing threats. And an open hole in their roof is a 5-alarm fire drill. This directly triggers the overhead predator instinct. Every fish, from a small bluegill to a giant northern pike, has a built-in fear of being attacked from above. It's their primary vulnerability. Think about a heron standing at the water's edge or an eagle circling overhead. The threat always comes from the sky. Your clean ice hole, combined with your movement, perfectly mimics this threat. The fish might be attracted to the vibrations of your lure, but as it gets closer and looks up, its survival instincts take over. It sees that bright light, that moving shadow, and the survival part of its brain screams death from above. The urge to eat is powerful, but the urge to survive is always stronger. And just like that, the fish you marked on your flasher turns and slowly swims away, leaving you wondering what you did wrong. There's another factor at play here: sound and vibration. Water is a fantastic conductor of sound, but slush is not. A clean hole with a hard water surface acts like a drum. Every little sound you make, from shuffling your feet to dropping your pliers, is transmitted more clearly down through that open water column. Now, consider a hole with a layer of slush. That slush acts as a dampener. It's a sound-absorbing buffer between you and the fish. It muffles the sharp, unnatural sounds from above, making your presence less jarring. Think of it like the difference between talking in a room with hardwood floors versus a room with thick carpet. The slush carpets your hole, quieting your presence and making you a stealthier angler. The fish may still know you're there, but it's a much less alarming signal. What you're really doing is violating their safe zone. Fish in a lake, especially in winter, establish areas where they feel secure. This is usually related to structure, depth, and, you guessed it, overhead cover. When they move into a flat to feed, they are already on edge, away from their typical safety zones. By creating a bright, loud hole right on top of them, you are fundamentally changing their environment from a perceived safe zone to a perceived danger zone. Even if they were actively feeding a minute before you drilled, that clean hole can be enough to put them off the bite. They'll either move out of the area or stay put, but become extremely cautious, what we call lockjaw. They are still there, you see them on the sonar, but their brain has switched from feed mode to survive mode. So what is the solution? It's beautifully simple. I call it slush camouflage. Instead of fighting the slush, you make it your ally. After you drill your hole, you don't scoop it all out. You leave a thin, uniform layer of slush floating on the surface. You're not leaving a giant, chunky iceberg in the middle. You're leaving a translucent, consistent layer, maybe a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch thick. This simple act fundamentally changes everything we've just talked about. It turns that harsh spotlight into a soft, gentle glow. It turns that clear window into a frosted, opaque pane of glass. It's the single easiest way to immediately make your presence less threatening to the fish below. You are essentially using the natural byproduct of drilling a hole to create the perfect natural cover. Let's get into how this slush camouflage actually works. It's all about light diffusion. Think about the difference between a clear light bulb and a frosted light bulb. They both produce light, but the frosted bulb spreads that light out softly in all directions. The slush does the same thing. The countless tiny ice crystals and air pockets in the slush scatter the incoming sunlight. Instead of a hard, focused beam, the light that penetrates the slush is diffused and gentle. It blends in much more naturally with the ambient light under the ice. From the fish's perspective, it no longer looks like a hole. It just looks like a slightly brighter spot on the ceiling, similar to how a thinner patch of snow or ice would look. It's a pattern they are used to and one that doesn't trigger their alarm bells. Beyond just diffusing the light, the slush cover is critical for breaking up your silhouette. Remember that terrifying shadow monster we talked about? With a layer of slush, that shadow becomes a vague, indistinct blur. When you lean over the hole, the fish doesn't see a clear, sharp-edged human form. It sees a subtle dimming of the already diffused light. It's a much less defined and far less threatening signal. You can move more freely, jig more aggressively, and check your gear without sending a panic signal to every fish within a 20-foot radius. You are effectively putting up a cloaking device between you and your target. It's the difference between hiding behind a clear pane of glass and hiding behind a heavily frosted one. Here's a practical experiment I urge you to try on your next trip, especially on a tough bite day. Drill 2 holes about 10 feet apart. Scoop one completely clean, the way you always have. On the second one, leave that thin layer of slush. Fish the clean hole for 20 minutes, then switch to the slushy hole for 20 minutes, using the exact same lure and presentation. I am willing to bet that you will see more fish approach the slushy hole with confidence, and your hookup rate on that hole will be significantly higher. This isn't just theory, it's a real-world application that countless seasoned anglers have discovered, often by accident. They noticed that the lazy hole they didn't scoop perfectly was the one that consistently produced more fish. A common question is, how much slush is enough? You don't want so much that your line is constantly getting tangled or frozen in a big chunk of ice. The goal is a thin, consistent layer. After drilling, use your skimmer to remove the big, heavy chunks of ice, but leave the watery, fine-grained slush behind. A good rule of thumb is to scoop until you can just start to see through the slush to the dark water below. It should be a translucent film, not a solid, white plug. For a 10-inch hole, you're looking for a layer, maybe a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch thick. It's enough to diffuse light and hide your movements, but not so thick that it becomes a major hassle for fishing. A great way to manage this is what I call the donut or channel technique. After you've cleared out the big chunks, use the edge of your skimmer to create a small, open channel or circle right in the center of the hole, just big enough for your transducer and your line. This gives you the best of both worlds. The majority of the hole is covered with that light diffusing slush, hiding your presence, but you have a small, clear opening to fish through, which minimizes ice up on your line and ensures your sonar gets a clear signal. You maintain your stealth while also keeping things practical. This is a pro-level adjustment that makes a huge difference, especially when you're hole hopping for finicky panfish. Now, what about managing your line and detecting bites? This is a valid concern. With a slushy hole, you might worry about your line freezing or not being able to see those subtle upbites on a spring bobber. The channel technique helps a lot. Also, using a high-quality braided line with a fluorocarbon leader can reduce ice up. But honestly, in the modern era of fishing, we should be relying more on the feel of our high-modulus graphite rods and the feedback from our electronics than on watching our line at the hole. The benefit of being hidden from the fish far outweighs the minor inconvenience of managing your line in a bit of slush. A fish that bites confidently is much easier to detect than a spooked fish that never bites at all. You also need to be able to adjust your slush level based on conditions. On a super bright bluebird sky day, you might want to leave a slightly thicker layer of slush for maximum camouflage. On a very dark, overcast day, or when fishing very deep water, say over 50 feet, you can get away with a thinner layer or even a mostly clean hole because the light penetration is already so low. The key is to be an adaptive angler. Think about how much light is available and how much of a contrast your hole is creating. The brighter the day and the shallower the water, the more critical your slush camouflage becomes. Don't just do the same thing every time. Assess the situation and adjust your cover accordingly. Let's talk about a specific scenario, ultra-clear water. This is where the slush technique goes from being helpful to being absolutely essential. In a clear lake, fish can see your clean hole from a mile away. They are notoriously spooky. Trying to fish for, say, shallow lake trout or perch in gin-clear water with a wide-open clean hole is an exercise in frustration. You're basically advertising your presence with a giant flashing billboard. By using a slush cover, you blend into the environment. This is often the single change that turns a day of watching fish on camera ignore your lure into a day of actually catching them. In clear water, stealth is not optional, it's everything. Here's scenario 2, shallow water panfish. Crappies and bluegills in water less than 10 feet deep are some of the spookiest fish on the planet. They live in constant fear of being eaten. When you drill a clean hole directly over their heads, you might as well have dropped a grenade. They scatter. But if you drill that hole and leave the slush, your presence is far more subtle. You can often watch on your electronics as they slowly move back in under you, feeling secure beneath that diffused light. For sight fishing big gills in the shallows, this is a game changer. You can keep your face close to the hole to see, and the slush will help hide your head and shoulders from their view. And finally, let's consider our third scenario. Spooky, pressured walleye. On many popular lakes, the walleye have seen every lure and every trick in the book. They are incredibly sensitive to pressure. These are the fish that famously show up on the vexillar, rise up to inspect your jig, and then slowly fade back to the bottom. They are interested, but something is telling them it's a trap. Often that something is the unnatural spotlight they're sitting in. By leaving the slush, you remove one of the biggest red flags. You allow the walleye to approach your lure based on its merits alone, without the added environmental stress of feeling exposed and vulnerable. You're taking away their final excuse not to eat. So, is a clean hole ever okay? Absolutely. There are times when it doesn't matter or can even be preferable. If you're fishing in very deep water, say 80 feet or more, the light penetration is so minimal that your hole isn't creating much of a spotlight. If you're fishing in very dirty or stained water, the fish can't see the surface well anyway. And if you're fishing at night, in the dark, A clean hole is perfectly fine, and it's much easier to manage. The key is to understand why the slush works. It's about light, contrast, and spooking fish in relatively clear water at moderate depths. It's not an absolute rule for every situation, but for the vast majority of daytime fishing scenarios, it's a rule you should be following. So let's wrap this up. The big critical takeaway is this: that perfectly clean jet black circle you've worked to create your entire life is a giant danger sign to the fish below. It's a spotlight, a break in their natural cover, and a window for predators. By simply leaving a thin layer of slush, you are not being lazy. You are being a smarter, stealthier angler. You're using natural camouflage to mask your presence. The real wow moment here is realizing that for years, many of us have been spooking the very fish we want to catch, not with our lure or our line, but with the hole itself. We've been ringing the dinner bell and then turning on a giant, terrifying spotlight right above the table. This isn't just a minor tip, it's a fundamental shift in how you should approach the ice. It means you can fish shallower in clearer water and have a legitimate shot at those line-shy, educated fish that have seen it all before. Thank you so much for sticking with me on this one. If this just blew your mind or confirmed something you've suspected for years, do me a huge favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more tips that go against the grain. Now I have to ask, after hearing all this, are you going to try the slush cover method on your next trip out? Let me know for sure in the comments below. I want to hear all about it.